Breaking right now, 5 people accused in a scheme to harbor illegal immigrant laborers for a Chinese restaurant. This is in Mobile. They were in federal court today.
Yeah, Fox 10 News investigative reporter Brendan Kirby is on the story for us, and he's standing by live at the federal courthouse downtown with the very latest. Brendan.
Well, Byron and Elise, one by one, the defendants lined up today to plead not guilty. A judge setting this case for trial in November. The indictment centers on the China Super Buffet restaurant on Airport Boulevard. Now let's run down the defendants. Zheng Kong Zheng owned the property where the restaurant was located. His wife is also the defendant, Yun Wang. Zheng's sister, Kong Mei Zheng, is listed as the restaurant's president. Zheng Guo Zheng owned the restaurant and is listed as its chief executive officer. They all pleaded not guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering and conspiracy to commit fraud. A fifth defendant, Jiao Zhuo, pleaded not guilty to the money laundering count, the only count she faces. She's married to one of the defendants. Prosecutors accused the restaurant operators of moving money around to make under-the-table payments to unlawful workers. Those illegal immigrants, according to the indictment, lived in a pair of houses owned by 2 of the defendants. Prosecutors also alleged that the defendants failed to disclose their illegal activity when they applied for COVID relief funds under the CARES Act. Defense attorneys Arthur Madden, who represents Jiao Zhuo, and Michael Walsh, who represents the other 4, didn't have a lot to say after leaving the courthouse.
Picked up the discovery a few minutes ago, and I've got to review it before I say anything. We entered a plea of not guilty.
I have no comment, right?
And although this case is set for trial in November, it's unclear whether it will stick to that schedule. Defense attorney Walsh told the judge today that he's not sure that he can be ready in time. Prosecutors call the evidence in this case voluminous. Reporting live outside the federal courthouse, Brendan Kirby, Fox 10 News.
New at 6, the Save America rally is scheduled to take place at the Georgia National Fairgrounds in late September. A now removed event listing on the fairgrounds site says it will happen Saturday, September 25th. Organizers confirmed to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that former President Trump would headline the rally. State lawmakers, Trump aides, and Republican officials told 13 WMAZ that news of the rally is a surprise to them. The rally could serve as a way for the former president to gather support for several Republican candidates running for office, including Herschel Walker, who recently announced he would mount a bid for the Senate seat currently held by Raphael Warnock.
Mexican forces cut off a new migrant caravan bound for the U.S. on Sunday, breaking up the main group near the southern town of Whistler and detaining several people. Before dawn, agents with riot shields and batons bore down on the group of around 400 people coming from Central America, Haiti, and Venezuela, and surrounding them on the edge of town. Hundreds of migrants, many accompanied by children or carrying babies in their arms, fled for the banks of the river Whistler. An eyewitness told Reuters some officials threw stones at members of the group to detain them. As dawn came, some stragglers continued to resist against authorities. The Mexican National Guard and the National Institute of Migration have been accused of using excessive force in their intervention. Local priest and migrant advocate Heyman Vasquez described the early morning swoop as an inhumane and cruel abuse of power that spread fear and alarm among travelers.
I know that our president is stubborn, and he always says that things have changed, that the National Guard are honest. I think some of them might be honest, but he needs to recognize that many elements in the National Guard aren't. They are corrupt, especially the National Institute of Migration.
The Mexican government recently condemned acts of violence captured on video against a previous caravan.
Now, a group of about 300 migrants in southern Mexico have set on their path to the United States, defying immigration rules and also challenging detentions, as the United States-Mexico border faces its worst migrant crisis in nearly about 2 decades. The group, which mainly consists of Central Americans, is the 4th set of migrants in a week to travel in search of a better future. The refugee agency in Mexico is clogged with protection requests with over 70,000 applicants. Most of them in the southern region of Mexico of Tapachula, where the National Guard had forced a crackdown earlier this week.
No tiene valor. Mira, todos nos están maltratando. La migración de otros países, muchos se están abusando de nosotros. Uno está cruzando un país, no está haciendo daño, uno no es ladrón, uno no es traficante de droga, nada. No paran pidiéndonos plata. A veces te hacen subir, la patrulla, te revisan. Si tú tienes plata, te quitan la plata. Es abuso de poder, es un abuso total lo que estamos viviendo acá en Tapachula. Por eso nosotros decidimos de agarrar la ruta, caminar a ver qué sucede.
Now, the U.S. Border Patrol reported nearly about 200,000 migrant encounters last month after an initial dip at the time of the COVID-19 outbreak. Recognizing the need to prevent illegal migration, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador spoke with U.S. President Joe Biden on the need to tackle the causes of migration from Central America.
Seguimos insistiendo con el gobierno de Estados Unidos y yo espero que esto ya se atienda lo más pronto posible para que se actúe y se les dé opciones a los que por necesidad tienen que abandonar sus pueblos.
Now, Mexico has seen an increase in the number of undocumented migrants since Democrat Joe Biden has taken charge of the United States in January. Now, as per the Mexican government, more than 25,000 troop members have been deployed along the borders to control the migrants.
Well, as a migrant caravan of at least 400 immigrants makes its way to the U.S. southern border seeking entry, the Biden administration mulls the idea of implementing a Remain in Mexico light version of Trump's policy in an attempt to curb the crisis at the border. Joining me now is former acting ICE director and former U.S. Border Patrol chief Ron Vitiello. Ron, good evening to you. Your reaction to what the administration is finally waking up to.
Good evening to you as well. It's about time. We're currently experiencing the largest surge on the U.S.-Mexico border that we've ever seen. I was involved in border issues for 34 years as a federal employee, and this is the worst I've ever seen it. And so using a policy or revoking this policy in January is what they did. That's the root cause of what's going on in the border right now. They can talk all they want about root causes and working with the Northern Triangle, but the root cause of this problem is them reversing the policy for Remain in Mexico. They took all the enrollees and they let them in the United States. They released many of them. And so more are going to come. That caravan that's formed now that tried to break in, we saw them trying to break into Mexico. We're going to see more of that because the incentive is really high. The Border Patrol is distracted by doing care and comfort for families and young children. So they're not patrolling the border as effectively as they could if they had these tools, if the traffic was much lower because of the migrant protection protocol that was put in place in 2019, which ended that surge.
Right.
And this surge now started again in January because of the revision of that policy, the rescission of it.
And Ron, to me, this just is sort of points out the glaring hypocrisy of this administration, if you will. You talk about the root cause. It was reversing the Trump policy. And now all of a sudden they said they had inherited this problem from President Trump, and that's why they were doing something about it. But now they're taking his policy and trying to reenact it because it's just gotten so out of control.
It has. It's the worst I've ever seen it, and it worked. If people want a due process, they want to go through the asylum process, and they wait in Mexico, then that's a better way to do it. Before the surge in 2014, we used detention to close that loop. But now the migrant protection protocols is a way for people to continue to pursue their claims in due process but wait in Mexico to do it, not be released in the United States. Because what we know about this population is they come here, they get released after a brief stay with CBP and the Border Patrol, and then they'll never show up to pursue that asylum claim. They will not go and seek relief in immigration court.
My understanding from what I've read, and there's not that much known about this just yet, but part of it would be that, yes, you have to wait in Mexico for that date, right? But we'll give you better living conditions, and we might even give you access to an attorney at that point. Who's paying for that part of it?
Well, obviously, it would be the taxpayers. For the Remain in Mexico policy and what they call the migrant protection protocols, for them to work, Mexico has to cooperate. So they have to use their own asylum system. They have to use their own public health resources. They have to use their own, migrant protections inside of their country. And so Mexico's a big part of it.
God knows they're not going to pay for it.
Right. So that should be a concern for all of us. But again, the policy worked, right? It reduced the flow to such a degree that it hit historic lows in the summer of last year. And so putting it back in place will give the tools to the front line, the DHS, and take that stress off of them having this constant surge of humanity at the border. Take that stress off of them and their families under the time of this pandemic. So it's important to recognize how it worked. And this administration is now coming around and you're going to try to give those tools back to CBP and the Border Patrol.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think it's possible this is sort of a Trojan horse policy? Because it's going to take a lot to enforce it, especially now that the floodgates have been open. In the last minute that we have left here, is this the Biden administration just saying, see, look what we're trying to do. Look what we're trying to do. Oh, but it's not working. That kind of thing.
Well, the court has told them they had to put it back together. They had to reinstate the previous policy. If they want to wind it down, they have to go through the rulemaking process. And so we'll see. It's going to take a commitment from this administration, a commitment from Mexico, and to hold them to account as well. And so I hope that they give the tools in its full strength to the front line, because it did work, and it makes the border safer for everybody that lives there, everybody that works there.
It did work, and I hear you. I guess my point is just we've got to see this administration see it through. They have to enforce their own policy, and we'll see how long this timeline takes to implement it as well. Ron, it's great to see you tonight. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
A suspected human smuggler leads officers on a high-speed chase that ends in a bailout. It was all caught on dashcam video. Texas counties along the border deal with pursuits like this daily. But this happened nearly 200 miles from the border, right here in Boerne.
Vanessa Croy with the conspired border team explains how this crisis is reaching much further than the Rio Grande.
Exiting the 543.
It's a danger border communities are living every day.
36, he's off the roadway.
Human smugglers leading law enforcement on high-speed chases.
8961.
But the video you're watching now happened in Kendall County.
Stop!
Just inside the Boerne city limits, nearly 200 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border.
Stop! Sir, stop!
There isn't any part of the country that's not being affected by this.
Kendall County Sheriff Al Oksher and District Attorney Nicole Bishop said the criminal organizations are using the I-10 corridor as a route for human smuggling.
They're coming up from the Del Rio sector and coming down I-10, potentially to San Antonio or as far east as Houston to stash houses.
They're coming from everywhere. Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala.
In the last few months, they say, there's been an uptick in smuggling cases.
But we haven't seen it to the degree that we have experienced it here in the last several months.
We've never seen the human trafficking element and really the predatory nature of the cartels of their own people and using them to make more money than they've ever made before.
Stop!
And trying to take down these criminal organizations can be daunting.
We can't get a handle on the border until we get a handle on these criminal cartels. And they are setting up these networks and these routes in our country, and they're strengthening every day. The longer we don't do something about it, the stronger they're going to get.
Oksher said until immigration laws are enforced, the cartels will keep their doors open for business.
There's not a person that crosses the border that the cartels do not know about. And how these people, these human people, are being used to and being exploited for monetary gain, and that is huge. People don't understand the magnitude of that.
But that's not stopping officials from cracking down on their business in Kendall County.
If we go after it hard, they will go around our county.
Stop! Sorry, stop!
We're going to do what we have to do to keep Kendall County safe.
Stop!
The driver in that video was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Bishop said the 20-year-old man is a Mexican national and had previously been deported 2 years ago. With the KENS 5 border team, I'm Vanessa Croy.
The man accused of murdering the mother of 2 state police officers while in the country illegally did not get sentenced for the immigration charges today, as was planned. Luis Talamantes Romero pleaded guilty to federal charges of illegally entering the U.S. for the 4th time. Meanwhile, while in the U.S., Talamantes Romero is accused of shooting and killing Vitiello in the driveway of her West Side home in November of 2019 during an attempted carjacking. Federal prosecutors wanted to use that murder charge to beef up the sentence in the immigration case. Today, a judge agreed to postpone that decision until after the murder trial, which is set for next year. District Attorney Raul Torres says his team is ready.
I think we have a very strong case, and I know that we are eager to present that case to try and hold Mr. Talamantes accountable for the Vitiello family and for the entire community.
Torres says they will be seeking a life sentence. For now, Talamantes Romero will continue to be held in federal custody.
The crisis at our southern border spiraling out of control with a record-breaking number of illegal crossings every single month. And now the Biden administration is reportedly weighing reinstating former President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. Here now to react is retired acting ICE director and Fox News contributor, Mr. Tom Homan. Good morning to you, Tom.
Good morning.
Good morning. Why do you think they're weighing this light version of the Remain in Mexico policy that Trump had stated? Why are they interested in that now? Is it because the poll numbers are bad?
Well, that's the biggest reason. Look, this past month is going to be over 200,000 again. They haven't announced it yet, but it's going to be over 200,000. They haven't announced it. They're trying to figure a way to spin it, but they can't survive this. They can't take this beating every month. I'm sure there's people at the White House that are not an idiot, that realize that, look, this is going to hurt us in the midterms. So understand this. First of all, they're going to reinstate the Remain in Mexico program, at least they're supposed to, because they were ordered by the courts to do it. I've been involved in 3 lawsuits, Ainsley. I've written more affidavits suing this president than I did during my entire career. We won the moratorium on deportations. We won the ICE priorities lawsuit, and we won the Remain in Mexico program. These people have to be ordered by the courts to do their job. And what's the first thing they do? They appeal the decision because they want to continue doing what they're doing. But I'm convinced there's people in the White House who are saying, look, this is bad. This isn't working. We're going to lose the midterms and probably the White House if we don't change policies and control the border.
There was a guy that's been on Fox several times. His name's Brent Smith. He's a rancher in Kenny, Texas, and he says he's had to spend $60,000 to repair the fences on his property. He said he found 3 bodies in the area last week. He says if you don't have a gun, you're going out on your own risk. He says we can't even walk in our backyards, even during the daylight. What are some of the stories you've heard down there?
I talked to one sheriff last month that found 48 dead migrants in his county alone. 48. That's one county out of hundreds of counties on the southwest border. The thing I hear the most is about right now is the missing families, right? They over 112,000 children have entered this country illegally, which is the highest number in the history of the Border Patrol. They released thousands of family units. It came out last week that about 40% of those family units can't be found. Now, they attacked the Trump administration for 2,500 family separations, but in the meantime, they got 45,000 children they can't find. This is an inhumane policy. Children are dying. Women are getting sexually assaulted. The records amount of fentanyl coming to this country has caused over 90,000 overdose deaths, and they're not doing a thing about it. They have to be ordered by the courts to do their job and secure the border. They're not doing it for the right reasons. They're not doing it because they want to save lives. They're not doing it because they want to help the Border Patrol. They're not doing it to secure the border. They're doing it for their political future. That's the only reason they're considering on changing some of these policies at all.
What do you mean by that? They want Texas and Arizona, some of these other states to turn blue?
They're afraid they're going to lose the midterms because of the border crisis. This is about politics. This isn't about doing the right thing for the country. They're looking at some of these policies and get back to some of the other Trump policies because of the election. It's about their political future, not the safety and security of our country.
Yeah, and then you've got the Afghanistan problem. What do you expect in the midterm elections?
Look, let's leave that. Let's not leave the Afghanistan problem. The border is more vulnerable now than it's ever been, right? We already know that 40% of the Border Patrol is not on the line because they're dealing with family units. That's why the fentanyl's coming across. That's why 1.3 million encounters already on the border. Thousands of terrorists have been released from the prisons of Afghanistan, whose sole purpose in life is to do harm to this country. If you're a terrorist, you want to come to this country to do us harm, you can't get a plane ticket, you can't get a visa because of the checks we've done since 9/11. You're going to come across the southwest border the same way 20 million others did.
It's very scary. I read a story this morning that thousands of them have been deemed at risk, the ones that we have taken in from Afghanistan. Thank you so much, Tom, for being on with us.
Centro Sector rescued a handful of undocumented immigrants over the Labor Day weekend. The rescues all took place in the Hakumba Wilderness region in 2 separate instances. Agents first encountered a group of 3 undocumented men who alerted them to a woman who they said couldn't keep up with them and might be lost. The next day, agents received another call regarding a group possibly lost in the mountains near Ocotillo. We are told all the people are from Mexico. It's also worth noting that since October now, the El Centro Sector has now rescued at least 315 individuals lost or in distress. Meantime, agents in the Yuma sector tell us just over Labor Day weekend alone, they apprehended more than 2,500 people. This photo from the field shows a group of 71 people who entered early Monday morning.
And El Centro Sector agents also tell us they arrested an undocumented individual with gang ties and has an active warrant out for his arrest. The 29-year-old was taken into custody after illegally entering the U.S. near the Calexico East port of entry. And 2 convicted sex offenders were also apprehended by El Centro Sector Border Patrol agents after crossing into the U.S. illegally. Both of their criminal records involve minors, and the 2 men have also been removed from the country once already before. Just since October, agents in El Centro have removed 40 people either convicted or wanted on sexual offense charges.
Border Patrol officials tell Fox News that a majority of asylum seekers at the southern border are being returned to Mexico. Now, that's after the Supreme Court ordered last month that the Trump-era policy be reinstated. Jonathan Hunt is live in La Jolla, Texas for us, where you can catch us up. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Dana. We're trying to get official word from either the Department of Homeland Security or the White House as to whether there has been a formal order since that Supreme Court ruling sent down to Border Patrol agents. But as you look at pictures of families arriving here in La Jolla early Sunday evening, I can tell you that at least one Border Patrol supervisor is telling us that now all families are being sent back unless they have a child under the age of 1. Pregnant women are being allowed to stay as well, but that is about it. According to this Border Patrol officials, others are all being sent back to Mexico in the wake of that Supreme Court ruling. Now, when they go back to Mexico, they are often in the camps that we have seen for many months now, just on the other side in Tijuana, the camps you're looking at right now, for instance, under what were called the Migrant Protection Protocols. Now, this is causing some blowback from immigration advocacy groups. A whole slew of them have sent a letter to the Mexican president saying that he should stand up to the Biden administration if they do reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy. The letter says in part, quote, as a sovereign nation, Mexico has the right to reject the reinstatement of MPP or any future iteration of this policy that aims to externalize the U.S. border into Mexican territory. It is impossible to re-implement MPP in a way that upholds human rights and due process, and Mexico has the responsibility to block this detrimental policy. Now, it's too early to say, of course, as apprehensions continue right along the Mexico border. This video you're looking at now in Laredo, Texas, it's too early to say whether, if indeed those migrant families are being returned in greater numbers to Mexico, whether that will have an effect in perhaps dissuading some to try crossing the border illegally. We're due to get new figures for August, at least, Dana, from Customs and Border Protection, probably around the end of this week. That will give us the total for the number of encounters in August. Remember, in July, we had a record 212,000. Anecdotally, I would say that we might be slightly below that, but we're only in one area of the border. Obviously, we can't see the bigger picture, but it's going to be very interesting to see what those August figures are, Dana.
Well, and it didn't really slow down in the hot summer months as it usually does, so we'll look forward to getting those numbers.
Sure.
Jonathan, thank you.
Immigrants and lower-wage workers in the Iowa City area tonight are pressuring the city leaders to please support them. About 80 people talked at tonight's city council meeting, asking for some of the funding which will be coming from the American Rescue Plan. With that in mind, let's go live right now to Iowa City reporter Travis Breeze. He has more on their message tonight to the city.
Ron, the Fund Excluded Workers Coalition wants direct payments to immigrants who did not get COVID-related stimulus checks, likely because of their citizenship status. The city has talked about supporting these immigrants to an extent, but the coalition feels that it is not enough.
Unido, jamás será vencido. Tomamos el riesgo de salir a trabajar.
We took the risk to leave and go work.
Para que la sociedad siguiera funcionando.
So that society would keep functioning.
Iowa City leaders are about to decide how to spend $18.3 million from the American Rescue Plan. They have said they support direct payments to undocumented immigrants.
For those that were excluded, I think this is a great opportunity that we can give to those individuals.
City Manager Jeff Fruin suggested spending about $1.5 million total on these payments. The coalition says the minimum it would accept would be $8.5 million from the city and county together.
It's not big enough. It's not enough money. There's not enough funding going to these folks who are a part of our community and who helped bring us through the part of the pandemic we've been through so far and have kept us safe and healthy.
While the city says it still needs time to deliberate, these people say they're hurting now and they need help.
Y así compensar un poco lo que vivimos durante la pandemia. Gracias.
And this might give us just a little bit of what we deserve because of what we went through the pandemic. Thank you.
If the coalition got their minimum amount of $8.5 million, they say it would go towards payments of $3,200 each for immigrants and their families. They say that, and their children, excuse me. They say that would equate to the total amount that full U.S. citizens got during the pandemic. In Iowa City, Travis Breeze, News 7 KWWL.
Joining me right now is Texas's Attorney General, Ken Paxton. AG Paxton, it's great to see you this morning. Welcome back. Thanks very much for being here. Give us a scoop on the new voting law. I saw Greg Abbott's tweet, and he says it ensures every eligible voter gets to vote, adds more hours to vote, makes it harder for fraudulent votes to be cast, makes ballot harvesting a third-degree felony. It's easier to vote and harder to cheat. That is not what your colleagues on the left are calling it, Ken.
Well, so hard-fought battle over the last few months. As you mentioned, the Democrats, instead of staying here and debating the bill, left the state. And what I love about what Governor Abbott and the legislature did is they just kept coming back and waiting for the Democrats to return. And they passed, I think, a really good bill. As I said, much harder to cheat, but it's easier to vote. There are more extended voting hours. Of course, the criticism never talks about how this allows for more voting. And they also don't talk about how when we passed election integrity bills in the past, how we get more people voting. It actually has increased our voting, just the opposite of what they always say. And then finally, you'll notice they don't necessarily seem to criticize any particular part of the bill. They just lump it all together and say it's not a good bill, but they never say exactly why.
Yeah, I want to move on to the border, but real quick, can you assess the rest of the country and these other states? Is it 14 or 16 states that have come up with their own voting integrity laws?
Well, I know it's a lot, and I think it's really important because, as you saw in the last election, the craziness going on with mail-in ballots, and I can tell you, mail-in ballots are unreliable. We prosecute voter fraud in this state in my office, and over 50% of our cases are mail-in ballots because it's almost impossible to know for sure as you mail these people ballots whether they're the ones actually voting unless there's some type of photo ID requirement, which we've just added to ours. So I think it's really important, if we're going to have elections that people trust, that we have elections that we know are not filled with fraud.
All right, let's move on to the border. Border enforcement officials are now saying that they are turning away more migrants attempting to enter the country after the Supreme Court allowed the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policy to be reinstated. A.G. Paxton, I've been questioning this since we heard from the Supreme Court, because don't you need Mexico's okay for this? Do we need to renegotiate again with Mexico after the Trump administration did so, and then the Biden administration canceled Remain in Mexico on day one? Will this actually be reinstated?
You know, it's supposed to be reinstated by law. They have to return these people or detain them. And so they don't have a choice. So they're going to have to figure out some way to deal with Mexico. Obviously, President Trump did this. There's no reason President Biden can't do that. We're going to be watching the numbers to see how they've been affected by this Supreme Court ruling. Obviously, this is a case that Missouri and Texas brought, and we think it's super important because it actually worked, and we saw it work under the Trump administration very well. Let's see if the Biden administration can perform even close to what the Trump administration did.
So how do you assess things right now? We were worried that things would only get worse in the summer months, and we're already up to, what, 1.5 million people apprehended in 2021 alone. July alone was 212,000 for the month. Do the math. That's about 7,000 people apprehended a day versus July 2020, which, of course, under the Trump administration, we were at a 45-year low in terms of apprehensions. AG, what's your take on where we are today?
So we went from the Trump administration, which had the best policies I've ever seen to deal with illegal immigration and this whole asylum issue and making sure that people that had committed crimes were deported immediately, to the Biden administration, which ended all of those good policies and tried to change law without going through the proper process. I'm hopeful now that we've won a couple of these lawsuits, sending people back to Mexico, also making sure that when prisoners are released, they also have to leave, because the Biden administration was allowing people that were convicted of crimes to stay in the country. So we'll see, I think, as the numbers show up for August and then September, whether the Biden administration is actually following the law or they're continuing to disobey not only federal law, but a Supreme Court order.
Well, it's pretty extraordinary that they keep blowing off the Supreme Court. They did that as well with the eviction moratorium extension as well. And you've been very successful fighting back this radical agenda.